Assalamu alaikum. This is Mehirunasa Shapla, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Naranganj Government Mohila College, welcoming you to my today's online based class. Dear students, how are you? I hope everybody is fine and safe from this pandemic. For a few days I have been taking online classes with the students of honors second year. And today once again I would like to welcome them because I have been taking classes on one of your courses from your syllabus, that is romantic poetry. In the last class I completed Tinter Nabi, which was written by William Wordsworth, and today I would like to start the class with another romantic poem that was also written by William Wordsworth. The name of the poem is Immortality Ode. Immortality Ode is not the main title, it is not the real title of the poem. The full title of the poem is Ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. It was partly written in 1803 and partly written in 1806, and it was published in 1807. Wordsworth says that 2 years at least had passed in writing the first four stanzas and the remaining parts. It's an ode, that is to say a lyric. It's a long poem with 11 stanzas having 206 lines, and I'm afraid because I don't know whether I can complete this long poem in this class, in this session or not. So let's start the class with the text. So dear students, this is the text. This is the first stanza. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth, and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is now as it hath been of yore. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen I now can see no more. So here immortality is used in the sense of eternity. There was a time means in the days of childhood. Grove means trace. Every common sight means the most ordinary commonplace or thing. So in the first stanza, the speaker says wistfully that there was a time when all of nature seemed dreamlike to him, apparelled in celestial light. So in the second, look at the second stanza. The rainbow and comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The moon doth with delight look round her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth, but yet I know wherever I go, that here hath passed away glory from the earth. So in this stanza, we find beautiful images like rainbow, rose, the moon, the sunshine, the starry night, and a picture of the formation of rainbow and quick fading away in the sky. So this is a fine picture of the moon shining in cloudless sky in line 12 and 13. It seems to the poet that the moon looks joyfully around her in the sky. So everything still appears fascinating under the starlit sky to the poet. The rising of the sun is still charming to the poet. The heavenly glory or the celestial light which the poet used to see as a child has now departed from the earth. In the third stanza, look at the third stanza. Now while the birds thus sing a joyous song, and while the young lambs bound as to the tabard sound, to me alone there came a thought of grief. A timely utterance gave that thought relief, and I again am strong. The cataracts blow their trumpets from the steep. No more shall grief of mine the season wrong. I hear the echoes through the mountains strong. The winds come to me from the fields of sleep, and all the earth is gay, land and sea. So I cannot, this is a long poem. I cannot recite whole stanza, so I want to skip it. So in the third stanza, the speaker says that while listening to the birds sing in springtime and watching the young lambs leap and play, he was stricken with the thought of of grief, but the sound of nearby waterfalls. Cataract means waterfalls. So waterfalls, the echoes of the mountains and the gustling of winds restored him to strength. So the line, the cataract blow their trumpet from the steep, means the waterfalls dash down the rocks, making a loud sound, loud noise. So this line is to be noted for its sounds, and this is a beautiful example of a sound picture made by William Wordsworth. And here we find other images like echoes of sound of animals, of waterfalls, and songs of birds. Here another image, that is fields of sleep. So it means fields that have been wrapped in sleep, fields which are resting or sleeping still. The poet means that he hears innumerable sounds echoing through the mountains. He says further that morning breezes come to him from Mayfields which are wrapped up in the sleep. So here the poet declares that his grief will no longer wrong the joy of the season, that all the earth is happy. He exhorts a shepherd boy to shout and play around him. So here so here the poet declares that his grief will no longer wrong the joy of the season, that all the earth is happy. He exhorts a shepherd boy to shout and play around him. So now look at the fourth stanza. Ye blessed creatures, I have heard the call, yet to each other make I see the heavens laugh with you in your jubilee. My heart is at your festival. My head hath its coronal. The fullness of your bliss I feel it all. Oh, evil day, if I were sullen while earth herself is adorning the sweet May morning, and the children are calling on every side. In a thousand valleys far and wide, fresh flowers, while the sun shines warm and the babe leaps up on his mother's arm. I hear with joy, I hear. But there is a tree of many, one a single field which I have looked upon. Both of them speak of something that is gone. The fancy at my feet doth the same tale repeat. So in this stanza, he addresses nature's creatures and says that his heart participates in their joyful festival. Blessed creatures mean the lambs and the shepherd boy. In fact, all not only the lambs and the shepherd boy, but all the objects of nature. Here, the sky looks bright in full sympathy with their joyousness. Here, jubilee means merriment. Why are they in joyous mood? The answer is, the most important festival among the Jews, which was celebrated every 50th year to commemorate their deliverance from Egyptian slavery. So he says that it would be wrong to feel sad on such a beautiful May morning while children play and laugh among the flowers. So here pansy is a kind of flower. So let's have a look at the sixth stanza. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life stir, hath had elsewhere its setting, and come from afar, not in entire forgetfulness, not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of prison house begin to close upon the growing boy, but he beholds the light, and whence it flows he sees it in his joy. The youth who daily further from the east must travel still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day. So here the poet says that at birth we forget the condition of our previous existence. He means to say that with birth we do not awake in consciousness, but rather lapse away from consciousness, because the consciousness of bliss that we enjoy it in heaven. The human soul is compared to a star in this poem, which sets in one horizon and rises in another, and before coming to this earth the soul lived in heaven, the star that guides us through our life into this world, namely the soul. The poet here modifies his his former statement that the forgetfulness of our previous life is not complete. When the sun is set, the clouds are tinged and scarlet with glorious light. So even when we have passed away from the constant sight of God, which we enjoyed before our birth, even some remnant of our former glory clings to us. So in other words, man when born has some sort of dim vision of the glorious home that is heaven he has just left. And here he proclaims that human life is merely a sleep and forgetting, that human beings dwell in a purer, more glorious realm before they enter the earth. As children we still retain, according to Wordsworth, as children we still retain some memory of that place, which causes our experience of the earth to be suffused with its magic. But as the baby passes through boyhood, younghood, and at last into manhood, he sees that magic die. So the next stanza is, earth fills her lap with pleasures of her own, yearnings she had in her own natural kind, and even with something of a mother's mind, and no unworthy aim. The homely nurse doth all she can to make her foster child, her inmate man, forget the glories he hath known, and that imperial palace whence he came. In this stanza, earth is compared here to a foster mother. Man is taken away from his true home, namely heaven, and left in the care of the foster mother for some time. Earth provides the newborn child with all kinds of pleasures to amuse him and to make him forget all about the heavenly home from where he comes. So here, the falling in love of the child with earthly things is not a bad one, because once the child is placed under care, it is her duty, it is the duty of the earth to make the child happy in his new surroundings by making him forget everything of his heavenly glories. Let's look at the next stanza. Behold the child among his newborn blesses, a 6 years darling of a pygmy size. See where midwork of his own hand he lies, fretted by sallies of his mother's kisses, with light upon him from his father's eyes. See at his feet some little plan or chart, some fragment from his dream of human life, shaped by himself with newly learned art, a wedding or a festival, a mourning or a funeral, and had now his heart unto his he frames his song, then will he fit his tongue of dialogue of business, love, or scribe, but it will not be long. Here I skipped some lines. The little actor calls another part, filling from time to time his humorous stage with all the persons down to Pelsit age. So I'm going to paraphrase it because the stanza is somewhat long. So here the poet now points the picture of a small child playing with toys which are a source of great delight to him. So it is it's an important thing to notice that according to Wordsworth says that in writing this stanza he had his he had his in his mind Hartley Coleridge. Hartley Coleridge is the son of the poet S.T. Coleridge. So the child is 6 years old and is as yet very small. The sight of the child stirs a deep affection in the heart of the beholder. The child sits or lies in the midst of his toys, which he has arranged on his childish fancy took him. Here the mother is found to bend forward to kiss the child, because the mother's, according to Wordsworth, mother's love is irresponsible, because with this love this is an interruption to the child, and the child seems to be troubled by the mother's frequent kissing. And on the other hand, we find that the father looks at the child looks at the child with deep affection. Here we can notice that while the mother's love is expressed in kisses, his father contents himself with gazing at the child affectionately. So here another thing is very important, that is gradually the child will speak words connected with business or love or quarrel, because these words are overheard by him, but he will imitate what he has heard. Soon the child will cease his imitation of business or love or strife and pass to another subject. The child is compared to an actor here, just as an actor plays several roles one after the other. Similarly, the child imitates various action and speeches. The next stanza is, Thou whose exterior semblance doth belie thy soul's immensity, thou best philosopher, who yet dost keep thy heritage, thou eye among the blind, that deaf and silent readest the eternal deep, haunted for ever by the eternal mind, mighty prophet, seer blessed, on whom those truths do rest, which we are toiling all our lives to find, in darkness lost, the darkness of the grave, thou over whom thy immortality broods like the day, a master over a slave, a presence which is not to be put by. This is another long stanza, so I want to skip it. I want to make paraphrase of this stanza. So in this stanza, the poet says, the outward appearance of the child gives an innocent idea of the great of his soul, of his soul. So the child is a pygmy in body, but a giant in soul. So the small outward appearance of child often makes us think that the child is an insignificant creature, but this is a wrong idea, because child has a great soul. According to the poet, children unconsciously know those deep truths of life which our learned philosophers among men are fail to find out. The child has a direct vision of divine glory. That is why he knows the truth, and the child can see those truths which we grown up and men cannot find out. Here, the word deaf has been variously explained by the poet. Firstly, deaf to our eulogies. Secondly, deaf to the temptations held out by the earth, the homely nurse. Thirdly, unconsciousness of innate powers. Here the poet calls the child prophet, mighty prophet. It means unconscious declarer of truth, and seer blessed means someone who has a vision into things unseen. So let's have a look at the stanza number 9. O joy that in our embers is something that doth live, that nature yet remembers what was so fugitive. The thought of our past years in me doth breed perpetual benediction, not indeed for that which is most worthy to be blessed. Delight and liberty, the simple creed of childhood, whether busy or at rest, with new-fledged hope still fluttering in his breast. Not for this I raised the song of thanks and praise. So this is another long stanza. I want to skip it. I just paraphrase this stanza. Okay, so here the poet experiences a surge of joy at the thought that his memories of childhood will always grant him a kind of access to that lost world of instinct, innocence, and expectation. So he says, when he thinks of his childhood, he is filled with a spirit of celestial gratitude to God. Here, new-fledged hope means young hope, and his breast is always full of fresh hope. Here, hope is compared to a bird which has just learned to flutter its wings and has made its nest in the child's heart. Noisy years means our life full of hurry and bustle, excitement and turmoil. So here, the poet, according to the poet, the spiritual truth that dawn upon our mind now can never disappear altogether. Here, another important thing is the poet uses the phrase immortal sea. Here, he picturizes the human soul drifting across the ocean of eternity. Immortal sea means ocean of eternity, to be tossed into human birth upon the shore of this earth. And according to Wordsworth, we can realize with help of our memory and imagination the state of childhood surrounded by celestial light, and we can once more hear the sound of the waves of eternity. This is an eternity, and this is an example of Wordsworth's transcendentalism. So, dear students, look at the stanza number 10. Then sing, ye birds, sing a joyous song, and let the young lambs bound as to the tabor sound. We in thought will join your throng. Ye that pipe and ye that play, ye that through your hearts today feel the gladness of the May. What trod the radiance which was once so bright, be now forever taken from my sight. So this is another long stanza. I want to skip it. I want to paraphrase it. So here, bolstered by this joy, the poet urges the birds to sing and urges all creatures to participate in the gladness of the May. He says that the vision of childhood, which invested all subjects of nature with heavenly light, can never be recaptured by the poet. During childhood, the grass. During the childhood of the poet, the grass, the flower, and other familiar objects of nature seem to be invested with divine light or with a dream-like vividness. So now, when he has advanced in years, the grass, the flower, and other familiar objects of nature appear no longer as beautiful to him as they did when he was a child. He says that though he has lost some part of the glory of nature and experience, he will take solace in prime sympathy in memory and in the fact that the years bring a mature consciousness. So this expresses the philosophic mind of William Wordsworth. And we have reached the final stanza, that is and oh, ye fountains, meadows, hills, and groves, forbode not any severing of our loves. Yet in my heart of hearts I feel your might. I only have relinquished one delight, to live beneath your more habitual sway. I love the brooks which down their channels spread, even more than when I tripped lightly as they. The innocent brightness of a newborn day is lovely yet. The clouds that gather round the setting sun do take a sober coloring from an eye that hath kept watch over man's mortality. So just skip it. I want to skip it. So the paraphrase of this stanza is, here the speaker says that this mind which stems from a consciousness of mortality as opposed to the child's feeling of immortality enables him to love nature and natural beauty all the more. For each of nature's object can stir him to thought, and even the simplest flower blowing in the wind can raise in him thoughts that do after light too deep for tears. So these are the paraphrases of, or the stanza wise explanations of this poem. So dear students, please read this poem over and over again and try to understand every line on your own. And I will stop today. I think this is enough for today. So in the next class, I will come with the critical appreciation of this poem. So stay fine, and until then, Allah Hafiz.